The silent reckoning. When karma collects it, often appears that the worst individuals are succeeding. But life doesn't settle its debts publicly. It collects them in silence. Stoics don't pursue revenge, they observe, because while you are finding peace in your healing, karma is already at work, and it never misses its mark. I know it feels unjust at times. You gave your all, loved honestly, and remained loyal even as your name was slandered behind your back. Yet somehow, those who lied, ghosted, and betrayed seem to be thriving, smiling, glowing, winning. But deep down, something feels off, right? That's because what you're witnessing is a facade. Karma isn't interested in facades. It's interested in truth. This video isn't fueled by bitterness. It's about clarity. It's about understanding what truly unfolds behind the scenes when someone disregards something genuine and pretends it never mattered. It's about the subtle, yet powerful indicators that someone is already facing the repercussions of how they treated you not in plain sight, but in the quiet corners of their own life. This is the same silence that Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius taught us to seek, not as a sign of weakness, but as a source of wisdom. Because within that silence, truth invariably speaks the loudest. If you value content like this content, that offers genuine healing, perspective, and empowerment in your life, I have one simple free request. Hit that subscribe button. This way you won't miss any of the insights we're building together. Let's delve in. The illusion of their healing. Decoding their performance, they say healing is a quiet process. Yet a quick scroll through your social media feed reveals everyone loudly proclaiming their new chapter. The very people who once lead to your face, dismissed your worth, or departed without explanation are now the most vocal online. Every post seems meticulously crafted, every smile rehearsed. You see picturesque sunsets, vibrant smoothie bowls, serene spa days, and captions, brimming with words like peace, growth, and divine timing. At first glance, it might affect you. It might cause you to question everything. Were they always this content? Did they truly move on so effortlessly? Was I the only one experiencing pain? But let's slow down and be realistic. True peace doesn't require a press release. Genuine growth doesn't demand a filter or a hashtag. The truth is, when someone is genuinely at peace, they don't feel compelled to prove it to anyone. They aren't performing for the algorithm. They're simply living quietly, fully and inwardly. This is something the Stoics comprehended centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." In other words, if you are healed, you embody it. You don't need to convince the world. You exemplify it. But what about those who wronged you? The ones who inflicted real damage? They're often the ones launching an all-out public relations campaign immediately after the fallout. And why? Because something within them remains unsettled. That constant posting, that urge to showcase how happy and unbothered they are, that's not strength. It's overcompensation. It's a subconscious declaration. Look at me. I'm fine. I didn't lose anything important. But they did, and deep down, they know it. This is where your power resides. Don't let their performance derail you. Don't compare your quiet healing to their loud pretense. Remember, the louder someone screams, "I'm fine," the more likely they are not. Peace makes no noise. Insecurity does, and the moment you start pursuing their highlight reel, you lose your grounding. Carl Jung once said, "Shame is a sleeting emotion." And many people, especially those who inflict harm and walk away from it, carry shame whether they acknowledge it or not. That shame propels them to project an image that suggests, "I'm above it all." But shame, like karma, is silent. It lingers in the stillness, in the moments no one witnesses. No amount of social media activity can drown it out. It's tempting to scroll and scrutinize every post. It's tempting to wonder if they've truly changed, if they've improved, if they ever felt remorse. But don't surrender your peace to a mere projection. Plato taught that the greatest victory is over oneself. Let that principle guide you. Your silence, your discipline, your ability to remain focused on your own path, that is your strength. That's the Stoic approach. Not to react, not to retaliate, but to rise in quiet power. You don't need to demonstrate your healing. You don't need to explain that you're okay. Your presence, how you conduct yourself, how you treat others, how profoundly you engage with the world speaks volumes. More than any written statement ever will. Aristotle believed that we are what we repeatedly do. If you operate with integrity, self-respect, and consistency, you don't need to prove a thing. You become the proof. So let them post. Let them pretend. Let them fabricate a version of reality that makes them feel less empty. That's their concern. But you remain grounded. Stay intentional. Stay still, even when the world is noisy, because in that stillness you grow. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is louder than a healed soul that doesn't flinch when it sees the person who once broke it attempting to act as if they didn't. And one final thought, don't confuse their spotlight with genuine success. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. Most people shy away from self-reflection. They fill their time with noise, distractions, and image management, but not you. You've looked inward. You've confronted your pain. You've undertaken the challenging internal work that no filter can replicate. So, the next time you see their posts, the next time you find yourself scrolling and wondering, pause, breathe. Remind yourself, peace doesn't post, it lives, and you are living it in silence with strength. That's not weakness, that's growth. That's real evolution. Keep going. Let them market the fantasy while you build the reality, the quiet unraveling. Karma's subtle corrections. Life doesn't always explode when someone acts wrongly. Sometimes it simply and quietly unravels, not with dramatic flares, but with empty spaces. A friend who once shared laughter stops replying. A job interview that felt promising never follows up. Their new relationship, the one they eagerly showcased, suddenly begins to feel hollow, as if they're holding hands with a stranger who doesn't truly see them. And then confusion starts to emerge. On the surface, everything seems fine, but something feels off, and they don't understand why. But you do. Because when you mistreat someone who approached you with an open heart, life doesn't always retaliate in fury. It corrects, much like nature restoring its balance. It subtracts the very things they once took for granted. Your patience, your loyalty. The emotional depth you offered without keeping score, they are no longer available, gone. And it's not just your absence. It's the absence of who they were when they had you. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And for individuals who have betrayed something genuine, that's the hard part. Looking in the mirror and realizing they pushed away someone who only ever wished to see them grow. And the more they evade that truth, the more life reflects it back, not as punishment. Initially, they don't notice it. The subtractions are subtle. A missed call. Here, a project falling through there. They attribute it to bad timing or misfortune. But over time, the pattern becomes undeniable. The connections they once had don't last. The excitement they felt fades more quickly. They attempt to replace you with new friends, new partners, new distractions, but it doesn't stick. Why? Because you weren't a temporary replacement. You were peace. You were presence. You were the grounding energy they didn't realize they needed until it vanished. Stoic philosophy teaches us that our role is not to control what happens to others, but to master ourselves. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And while they react with confusion, with a desperate search for new stimulation, you remain still, unshaken, because you know what they lost, even if they're only just beginning to sense it. Their world starts to feel unfamiliar. The emotional safety they experienced with youth, a safety they never thanked you for, has disappeared. And now they look around and realize that the people they surround themselves with aren't deep. They're fun. Perhaps they're flashy, exciting, momentarily entertaining, but they're not safe. They don't listen as you did. They don't grasp their unspoken thoughts. They don't notice the subtle shifts in mood, and that lack of genuine connection begins to wear them down. Plato once said, We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. That's what this is. A fear of light, a fear of clarity, because clarity means confronting the fact that they possess something pure, something real, and they discarded it as if it were replaceable. But you weren't just another person, you were home. And now, no matter how many places they flee to, no matter how many people they cling to, they cannot find that same feeling. Because you weren't merely offering attention, you were offering energy, sacred energy, the kind that cannot be faked or replicated. It's the kind that doesn't appear twice. The Stoics believed in aligning oneself with nature, with truth, with integrity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." When someone violates that inner truth, when they deceive, dismiss, or betray, they don't just harm the other person. They harm themselves. They detach from their own moral compass. That disconnection becomes the source of their restlessness. So now their victories feel shallow, their triumphs taste bland. Even when life seems to offer them good things, there's an emptiness beneath the surface. Because nothing feels whole when you're disconnected from who you were meant to be. And that version of themselves, the version that had access to your presence, your care, your forgiveness is gone, and no amount of superficial joy can replace it. Aristotle once said, "What is a friend? A single soul dwelling in two bodies." And what they lost wasn't just a partner or a friend or a lover. It was that soul connection, that space where they were seen without pretense, heard without interruption, loved without condition. And now they know they won't easily, perhaps ever, find that again. That's karma. Not a sudden strike, but a quiet erosion, a slow fading of things they assumed would always be there. You didn't slam the door, you simply stopped opening it. And while they may not vocalize it, while they may continue to pretend they're fine, the truth sits with them every night. In the silence, in the missed texts, in the moments when they realize that people around them only know the version of them that's still pretending. Let that be your peace. You don't have to fight. You don't have to argue. You don't have to post about it. You just have to stay grounded. Let life do what life does. It always circles back. When it does, it's not there to punish, it's there to reveal. And this time, it's showing them everything they lost and everything they could have had if only they had known how to cherish it. The mirror of karma. They're indirect confessions. Some truths don't need to be shouted to be heard. They resonate quietly in actions, in patterns, in the things people leave unsaid, but desperately hope you'll notice. You've witnessed it. The person who once disregarded your boundaries, toyed with your emotions, or walked away as if you didn't matter. Now, they're suddenly philosophical on social media, quoting betrayals, pontificating about fake friends, and advocating for protecting energy. Their feed is sprinkled with indirect jabs that somehow always circle back to your story. Even if they claim it's not about you. No tags, no names, but you know, you feel it. That's not growth. That's guilt cloaked in metaphor. It's a conscience attempting to process what it's not ready to admit. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct. Your life and you will call it fate." And that's precisely what's unfolding here. They can't bring themselves to confront the truth directly, so they dance around it. They speak in riddles, post vague wisdom, and hope that the right person you sees it. And here's the stark reality. People who are truly at peace don't throw digital tantrums, wrapped in quotes. They don't need to perform their healing. Genuine. Healing is quiet, manifest in how you treat others, not in what you type on a screen. It's lived, not staged. This is something the Stoics understood profoundly. Epictetus taught that we should live in such a way that if someone spoke ill of us, no one would believe it. That kind of character doesn't require hashtags. It requires presence. But what's happening here isn't presence. It's obsession. They're still entangled in the narrative, but now you've ceased playing your part. That's why they're circling you, with these messages that scream your name without ever uttering it. Because you've become a symbol in their mind, not merely a person they hurt, but but a reflection of who they were when they had you, and what they lost when they failed to value you. Plato believed that the soul remembers what the ego tries to forget, and what they're trying to forget, what they persistently push into passive-aggressive captions, is regret. They may not admit it, but their energy reveals the truth their words never will. Meanwhile, you've gone quiet. You've let go. And that silence, it's deafening. It's unsettling to someone who anticipated chaos. They sought a reaction, an argument, some form of response to confirm they still had emotional access to you. But you didn't grant it. That's not weakness. That's mastery, Marcus Aurelius wrote. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. You've become that revenge, not through spite, but through growth, by becoming the kind of person who doesn't chase closure, who doesn't clarify lies, who doesn't shrink simply because someone else can't handle the truth. So let them post. Let them twist the narrative to feel better about themselves. Let them compose poetry they hope you'll decode. Because all it does is prove they're still dwelling in the past while you've moved forward. You don't need to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. Aristotle once said, "Character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion." And your character, how you carry yourself without bitterness, how you maintain composure without retaliating, speaks volumes more than any post ever could. And this is where your real peace sets in, not just in knowing you're free from their drama, but in realizing you didn't lose anything by walking away. They lost you. They lost access to someone who genuinely cared. And now they're left attempting to write you back into their story through cryptic messages and half-healed quotes. But that's not your story anymore. You're not a character in there. You're the author of your own masterpiece. So stay silent. Stay still. Because your silence has become their mirror, and the longer they gaze into it, the more they're forced to confront themselves, not the version they present to the world, but the truth behind the filtered image. That's not cruelty. That's karma. And the beautiful part, you didn't have to lift a finger. The erosion of trust, karma's inner workup peculiar phenomenon, occurs in people after they harm someone who genuinely cared for them. Initially, they act as if it's nothing. They dismiss it, laugh it off, and move on quickly, almost too quickly. They might say things like, "You're too emotional," or "You're too sensitive," as if your capacity for deep feeling was some sort of defect. But give it time and observe closely. That very person who once scoffed at your vulnerability begins to navigate life with a subtle suspicion. They distrust everyone. Their circle of friends shrinks. Their smiles become strained. In their relationships, they all start to feel insecure. You see something shifted, but it wasn't external. It happened internally, like a fracture in their very foundation. Because when you betray someone who is good to you, you don't just lose them. You lose your capacity to trust what is good. You can no longer recognize pure intentions without wondering if there's an ulterior motive. Carl Jung articulated this perfectly when he said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. And when you've crossed a line you never imagined you would, your mind doesn't forget, starts projecting that same darkness onto everyone else. So now every kind gesture feels suspicious. Every compliment comes with a tinge of doubt. They begin to assume that everyone will lie the way they lied, ghost the way they ghosted, manipulate the way they did. Why? Because deep down, they understand what people are capable of, having witnessed it within themselves. This is one of karma's most subtle punishments. It doesn't always manifest as chaos or conflict. Sometimes, it simply appears as the gradual erosion of your inner world, slowly, subtly, like water wearing down stone. What was once a confident stride becomes guarded. What was once laughter becomes calculation. And before they even realize it, they're erecting walls, not to keep people out, but to prevent their guilt from seeping through. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But most people flee from that knowledge. They distract themselves with noise, with new faces, with packed schedules, anything to avoid sitting still with the truth of their actions. But the truth doesn't vanish. It waits. And eventually, it emerges in the form of self-doubt, that persistent voice in the back of their mind whispering, "What if I'm the problem?" And the longer they evade that voice, the louder it becomes. This is what Stoicism prepares you for. Not just external challenges, but inner clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When your thoughts are filled with shame, regret, and paranoia, your entire world begins to reflect it. And you can try to appear strong, you can pretend to be detached, but if your inner world is cracking, it will eventually show. So, they stop opening up. They stop sharing. They stop believing in love, because love demands trust, and trust requires integrity. And once you've betrayed someone genuine, it's difficult to perceive yourself as worthy of receiving something genuine in return. Plato spoke of the divided soul, how we are often at war within ourselves, torn between reason, spirit, and desire. The person who wronged you is now living within that internal conflict, and they may not admit it, but it manifests in their isolation, in their flinching at emotional intimacy, in their expectation that every good thing will eventually turn sour, because, in their mind, they're merely waiting for karma to come full. Circle, they think, if I could hurt someone like that, someone else could hurt me just as easily. That's not protection. That's paranoia. You, on the other hand, have evolved not by building walls, but by setting boundaries. It's not by distrusting everyone, but by trusting yourself more. You've walked through the fire and emerged stronger, not colder. That's what sets you apart. Stoicism teaches us not to react to every feeling, but to observe it, to understand it, and to act from a place of principle, not pain. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's your freedom, your ability to feel without being controlled by those feelings. But they're stuck in their own fear, stuck in their own guilt, stuck in a loop of anticipating betrayal, even when it's not present, because they've mistaken punishment for protection. They believe pulling away keeps them safe, when in reality it only keeps them lonely. This is how karma operates, not always with storms, but sometimes with silence. With the gradual loss of peace, the inability to truly rest even in quiet rooms, with the erosion of self-trust, because when you hurt someone who only ever wished to see you grow, you don't just lose them, you lose the parts of yourself that were open, kind, and free. So let them drift, let them doubt, let them rebuild their walls. But don't follow them back into that mindset. You've come too far to start shrinking now. Continue to stand in your truth. Continue to show up for yourself. And remember, your emotional depth was never the problem. It was the mirror that exposed what they couldn't face within themselves. Socrates once said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." And when someone walks away from wisdom, all that remains is confusion within them, around them, and eventually reflected back at them. That's the true cost of betrayal, not the act of walking away, but everything that follows when the noise subsides and the self is left unanswered, the poetic justice. Karma's reflection, there's a particular kind of lesson that life delivers. Not through words, but through reflection. It doesn't arrive with warnings or flashing neon signs. It appears in the form of another person, someone who enters their life and, at first, seems like everything they believed they deserved. Beautiful, magnetic, enchanting. The chemistry is electric. The connection feels intense. But then, the shift begins. Slowly, quietly. The texts take longer to arrive. The warmth dissipates. Vulnerability is mocked. Love transforms into a game. Suddenly, they're the ones. Left confused, hurt, and overthinking every small interaction. Sound familiar? That's not mere coincidence. That's karma in its most poetic form. Because karma, when it truly aims to teach, doesn't shout, it mirrors. It introduces someone into their world who behaves precisely as they did not to punish them, but to reflect them, Carl Jung said. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And when the reflection starts to sting, when the treatment begins to look a little too familiar, that's when understanding dawns. It's whether they desire it or not. They once mocked your sensitivity, called you too emotional, and suggested you were overthinking. Now, they're the ones lying awake at night, wondering if they revealed too much, if they cared too soon, if they're being too intense. They once dismissed your honesty. Now they crave honesty and receive indifference. Not heartbreak. It's a shift in perspective. That's the very pain they inflicted returning, not as vengeance, but as education. The Stoics believed in living in harmony with nature, and nature has a beautiful way of establishing balance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change. Life is what our thoughts make it." They believed they could act without consequence, that they could mistreat someone who loved them deeply and continue untouched. But life has a rhythm, a pulse, and when you disrupt that rhythm by betraying what's real, it eventually catches up, not because the world is cruel, but because it is fair. Now, they find themselves pursuing something that consistently slips. Away someone who provides just enough to keep them engaged, but never enough to feel secure. They post things hoping for a reaction, and they are met with silence. They open up, and they are mocked. They plead for clarity, and they are met with confusion. And that inner panic, that emotional whiplash, is the exact experience they once handed to you. Plato once said, "Justice in the life and conduct of the state is possible only as first it resides in the hearts and souls of the citizens." And justice on a personal level operates similarly. You don't always witness it publicly. You don't always get a front row seat. But it always arrives internally, subtly, relentlessly. You may never hear them admit it. They might never say, "I did this to someone once," but they'll feel it every time they overthink an unanswered message, every time they question their worth, every time they cry over someone who doesn't care the way they once didn't care. That realization doesn't require words. It resides in their silence. And here's the truth. They're not being punished. They're being shown. Life isn't out to get them. It's simply returning the energy they once released into the world. Socrates believed that the unexamined life isn't worth living. But not everyone possesses the courage to examine themselves until the mirror becomes too clear to ignore. And that's what this karmic connection is, a mirror they wanted to believe. They were untouchable, that they could hurt you and escape unscathed. But pain has a way of circling back, not to harm, but to teach. Not to destroy, but to awaken. This isn't about revenge. This is about understanding. And for the first time, they're beginning to understand you. Because no matter how much they try to control the narrative, they cannot control the feeling. The ache, the emptiness, the sense that something real was lost, that they were the reason it was lost. And now, no matter how many distractions they pursue, a part of them will relentlessly compare every new connection to what they once had and failed to protect, Aristotle wrote. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And if mistreatment becomes a habit, life has a habit of delivering that same energy back. Eventually, it becomes undeniable. They aren't just being hurt, they're being reflected. And when they look into the eyes of someone who treats them as they treated you, there's nowhere left to hide. So let them meet their match. Let them taste the confusion they once served. Let them sit in the silence that once echoed in your heart, because that's not punishment. That's the process. And if they choose to grow from it, excellent. If they don't, that's their path to walk. Yours? Yours is already miles ahead. Clearer, lighter. And finally, free from the burden of being the one who always had to feel too much. Let karma complete its work, quietly, truthfully, completely. Sometimes the loudest justice is the one only they. Here, you don't need to chase closure. You are the closure. Let life do what life does, and you keep your peace sacred. If this resonated with something you felt but couldn't articulate, there's another video waiting for you on screen that might be precisely what you need next. Thank you for walking this path with us here at Stoic Journal, where healing isn't loud, but it's always real. Until next time, stay grounded, stay still, and let your growth do the talking.